Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Let me just say what, hey, we got Bob's here, hey. What a special place Mended Hearts kind of has in my heart. As an interventional cardiologist, I was here for about 10 years or so. And for those of you who've experienced heart attack, right, it is probably the single most scary event that you've ever come across, right? And I remember, and for those of you, I mean, you don't have to call yourselves out, but if I was ever your doctor, you know, one of the things I probably talked about was the benefit of cardiac rehab and the fact that there will be people that you can connect with, right? And people who've been there before, right? And one of the things I really believe is if you want to go fast, you go by yourself, but if you want to go far, you go with a group, right? And Mended Hearts is that support and that vehicle for so many people to realize that there is life after a cardiovascular event, right? And so I just like, you guys, I want you guys to give yourself a round of applause, literally, for being here. Come on, like literally, because this is a big deal, right? And I don't think that we realize what that support and this community does to help support us and get us through those very trying times, right? So I just love this group so much. It's so great to see familiar faces. I did not move to Chicago, and I'm not like wearing some sort of monk robes or anything like that, but what I am doing is seeing through the tea leaves, right? And what is the next thing that we need to be doing for healthcare, right? To take care of people. So for those of you who have been with the mission group for a while, I left the group in August, and prior to that, I kind of came in as an interventional cardiologist. I was the one that brought the radial, so for anyone who's had an angiogram through the wrist, I was the one that kind of popularized that approach here. I started our structural heart program, so you don't have to raise your hands, but for people that have had transcatheter aortic valve replacement, I was able to set that program up here. For people who have atrial fibrillation, I was the one that was able to set up the Watchmen program, so this little plug that you put in, right? So kind of a lot of things, and kind of what I realized about myself and kind of the arc of my career is I really am into figuring out what's the next thing, right? What are the things that I need to bring to my community, to you guys, right, to really optimize your health, right? And so I made the somewhat counterintuitive decision to leave, because now as a founder, and I'm in my founder clothes, that's when you're a founder, you can wear jeans and that's okay. But now kind of having founded, what's the right verb tense there? I don't know. Having had found, I don't even know what I'm saying, right? But establishing this new program that really focuses on what I think we've been missing in healthcare, right? Which is what we're gonna talk about today, Health 3.0. So that's the kind of the setup for the story. Just a couple of housekeeping things. You guys know where the restrooms are. If you have a cell phone, if you can just go ahead and put that on silent now, and if you don't know how, raise your hand and we'll have somebody come help you with that. I don't have my for those of you who know me, I've got teenage daughters. They just turned 15 yesterday. So I didn't bring them with me, otherwise they'd be our tech support, right, our iPhone supports. And then if there are questions, feel free to hold on to those and we'll have time at the end, right? So Health 3.0. So most of us know this movie, right? Wizard of Oz, right? And I remember growing up, so I'm from Indiana. Elaine mentioned that I grew up in a town called Hobart, Indiana. And we got our first color television set. I might not look like that, but I remember when we had a black and white TV. And our first color television set was a Zenith wood cabinet TV, right? And it came with a remote control in the form of a 5-year-old short, fat Indian boy. Right? That was me, right? So when my parents had to change the channel, Sanju, put on, and there were only 3 channels, right? It was just CBS, NBC, and ABC. So you had to do the dials and all that stuff. So I was the remote control. And The Wizard of Oz came on TV, right? And I remember my mom saying in Marathi, which is our language, the TV must have gone bad, right? Because it's in black and white, right? And they were, can I say pissed? They were pissed, right? Because those Zenith TVs were pretty expensive at that time, right? And they're like, what the hell? Like, we bought this expensive, this is all in, it's so much funnier in my mother tongue, right? In Marathi, but it's like, what the hell? Like this, we spend all this money on this TV and this stupid American thing doesn't work. It was something like that, right? And so my mom says to her remote control, Sanju, go fix it, right? And then she walks out of the room, right? And then for those of you who've watched the movie, right, about 10 or 15 minutes in, when she gets to Oz, right, it goes into color, right? It becomes Technicolor. So at that point, my mom comes back in the room, looks at me, and she's like, wow. What did you do? How did you do this? You're amazing. You're going to be our technical guy from now on. So whenever there's a TV issue, you know, I mean, how many appliances do we have? A blender, you know, like whatever, like we are going to go to you to fix it, right? And as a result, I got better at fixing things because there was a belief that I could do it, right? And so it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So then as computers came in, I was like my dad's network guy at his office. I put the printers together, and it was all because of the Wizard of Oz, right? Dumb luck, right? And that's kind of what I think we're at with medicine, right? Is that we're doing great things, right? So now we have a lot of faith, right? But we need to be doing more, right? And we need to really, we're doing well at kind of acute disease, but we need to go beyond that, right? We're just by luck and by science, we're able to treat a lot of things, but we need to get ahead of that. We need to go one step further. And that's what Health 3.0 is all about, right? So a couple of did you know facts, right? And this is when it's supposed to get super scary, right? When, like in Shakespeare, right, there's 5-act plays, and the first act sets it up, and the second sets the conflict, right? So, you know, did you know? This is kind of scary statistics, right? So right now in the United States, every day, 11,000 people are turning 65 years of age, right? 11,000 of you guys, right? Some of you guys, I don't know, right? Is anyone's birthday today? That would be really, are you turning 65 today? Oh, okay, that would be really cool, right? My daughter's birthday was yesterday, so we have 3 birthday parties coming up. So 11,000 people, right? By 2034, so 10 years from now, we're going to have about 130,000 physician shortage. So 130,000 doctors we're short, right? So every 11 days, we're eclipsing the physician shortage, right? Every 11 days. This is April 17th. So already we've eclipsed, right? About 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy, right? 88%, right? Currently, 2 out of every 3 adults over the age of 25 is either overweight or obese, right? These are not good statistics, right? Because when you add in overweight and we add in metabolic issues, right, what does that equal? That's heart disease, right? But not only is it heart disease, it's cancers, right? It's hormone imbalances, it's falls, it's joint issues, right? And the workforce of physicians is no longer going to be able to take care of all these people that need their help. You think your wait times are long now? Right? I mean, this is a big deal, right? And so we can't rely on doctors. We need your help, right? And that's 3.0. So when we look at healthcare expenditures in the United States, right, it's about 1 out of every $5 out of our GDP, right, about 20% or so, that is devoted to healthcare, right? That's going to get more expensive, right? And now as Medicare has approved some of these weight loss drugs and all this stuff, that's just going to go up even more. That was before these statistics were drawn, right? But when you look at our outcomes over the past 10 years, despite spending all this money, right, we're still failing. We're still not reaching the goals of what we need to get to. We're not making you healthier, right? People are still getting sicker, right? Cancers, colon cancers. We're seeing a huge influx of cancers under the age of 45, right? I was recently introduced to probably the scariest term I've ever heard, which is something called turbo cancer, which, I mean, cancer is a bad enough word. Add turbo, it's really ugly, right? But we're seeing now these cancers that are just getting so ugly so quick, right? And what's behind that? And I think a lot of that is metabolic health. When you're insulin resistant, right, that means you need a higher level of insulin to get the same effect. Insulin is also a growth factor. One of the things that we look for when you're insulin resistant are skin tags. Has anyone ever had one of those things? You go to the doctor, you know, in the old days, you just take a thread and pull on it and, you know, it would go away, right? But what's happening there is there's a signal that your body needs to grow because you've got this growth factor. And so your skin just kind of pushes these polyps out, right? But now we're seeing data that shows that these medications, these diabetes drugs and things that are dropping your insulin level are also decreasing cancer, right? So what can we do, right? Are more drugs the answer? And I'm saying maybe, but probably not, right? Because there's something that we can do from a lifestyle. So the idea here is that we've been approaching health the wrong way, right? I kind of say we are waiting for the whole house to be on fire before we blow out the candle, right? And what we really need to do is rather go from this paradigm of treatment when something is wrong to preventing it from getting there in the first place, right? In this next phase of my career, that's exactly what I'm devoting it to, is preventing problems in the first place. I never want anyone to have another heart attack. I never want to be woken up at 2 in the morning to go in for a heart attack, certainly, right? But nobody should experience that, and I think we have it within our power to do that. So in the current model of healthcare, we are going super high tech, right? We've got, devices. So for those of you who don't know, that's a TAVR, that's a Watchmen. We've got robots, we've got antibodies, we've got viruses that combat other viruses, all these things, right? But I think kind of what we need to do is start bringing you guys into the team, right? There's one person that's been missing, right, in this whole teamwork, is that I want you to be part of this team, right? I want you to understand your health, right? I want you to understand that it's not just about taking medications, but how can getting a full night of sleep help cognition? How can that help you stave off Alzheimer's? How can not eating processed foods reduce your risk of cancer, right? And nobody's really talking about this. We all have some kind of an idea, right? But what we really need to do is focus on this and focus on how the choices that you make on a day-to-day basis really can have long-term effects. Oh, what happened there? All right, presentation's over. Who remembers this issue, vertical hold on television? I'm going back to the Zenith, right? So, you had in Chicago it was Channel 2, Channel 5, Channel 7, and we had WGN Channel 9. Those were the only 4 channels, right? And so as part of my job as the senior technician at 4 or 5 years old, whatever I was, of the Zenith TV, right? I had to go back there and fiddle with vertical hold, and once you got the vertical hold, the horizontal was off, remember? But kind of what I love about this is the image flips over on itself, right? And what we're kind of seeing with that is kind of what's old is now new again, right? And as we look at health, we need to get back to some of those things that we were doing before, the old things that we're doing that really improve our health. And just like our televisions have evolved, right? Does anybody want to admit that they had one of these? I think I came in. Which one? This one kind of looks like a microwave to me. Where's my pointer, right? That one looks like a microwave. I don't know why, but I think we were somewhere. I think this is the wood panel Zenith, right? But just like our televisions have evolved, so too does our healthcare need to evolve, right? So kind of what I call health 1.0, right? Was kind of the traditional. Who saw? I just saw Field of Dreams a few days ago. Who saw Field of Dreams, right? Like that Burt Lancaster, Archie Moonlight Graham, right? The old country doc with his bag and his umbrella, buying blue hats for his wife all the time, right? That's what I think of when I think of Health 1.0. Was this really kind of one directional relationship? The doctor says something and the patient does it, right? I don't question my doctor, right? I used to work at a VA hospital for years, and one of the most frustrating things for me was when I asked, "Do you have any questions?" They'll be like, "Whatever you say, doc," because bless the vets, like they just did what they were told. I'm like, no, I want you to have questions. Like I was trying to encourage it, right? But that was kind of the old model. You just do what the doctor says, right? And treatment was really at that point kind of based on kind of limited scientific knowledge, right? And it was fragmented. It wasn't standardized, right? Like one doctor in Hobart, Indiana would do something different than the doctor in Munster, Indiana, my hometowns, right? And then 2.0. So this is kind of where we're living right now, right? So now we are awesome at acute care, right? You have a heart attack, we open you up, we take care of you, right? Your gallbladder ruptures, you get in there, we cut it out, and you're great, right? So find a problem, fix a problem, right? That's kind of what we're doing right now. We have had great advances in surgical techniques, great advances in medical technology that have allowed this, right? But this isn't sustainable, right? So what is medicine 3.0, right? So medicine 3.0, in my mind, has 5 principles that we need to do, that we need to engage to really usher in this new era of healthcare, right? So what are those? So number 1, we have to realize that everybody is different, right? Believe it or not, right now, right, in our clinical trials, we don't take that into account. We might assess that men are different than women, which is kind of hilarious, right? Because of course they are, right? But in terms of treatment models, we're not separating what works better for women, what works better for men, at least in cardiovascular trials, right? But there's so much more variability beyond that, right? There's ethnic variabilities, there's genetic variabilities, there's toxicities that you've been exposed to. So like for anyone who's on Google Maps, go to Hobart, Indiana, and you will see that at nighttime, rather than reading by the northern lights, I was reading by the pink flames of the U.S. steel plant, which was about 3 miles away. And we would just get from the blast furnaces, get these pink things. And I probably had like kilograms of arsenic exposure in the course of my life as a result of that. But if you grew up in Lake Tahoe, right, you would not have that same exposure, right? So we need to be aware of these toxic exposures as well, right? We need to kind of understand that all of us are different. And now we have tools, right? Personalized medicine, DNA testing, right? It used to be hundreds of $millions to get your genotype done, your DNA tested, and now you can get a Black Friday deal for a 2-for-1, right? And it comes back to you rather than taking 8 months, it comes back in less than a week, right? So how do we incorporate that into taking better care of you, right? Number 2, prevention, right? Don't let everything get on fire. Don't become diabetic before we put you on medicines. Don't have cancer before we treat you, right? Find things sooner. Really kind of prevent things from happening in the first place, right? I love this. Sunblock does not cost 16 times as much as aloe. I just thought that was funny. SoCal, come on guys, right? That makes sense, right? Next is using and embracing new technology, right? At some point, people thought the wheel was probably controversial, right? Rock and roll was the devil's music, all this stuff, and now you listen to rock and roll in your dentist chair, right? In your dentist's office, right? So rather than being afraid of new technology, embracing it, figuring out what we can do and how we can use that better. Has anybody here gone to like the Apple store and see the Apple Vision Pro, that 3D headset thing? If you haven't, sign up. It's free to do a trial. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And the first thing that I thought was, wouldn't this be awesome in a clinic, that I could show you a 3-dimensional model of your heart based on your CT scan, and you don't even have to be in the same room as me, right? You can be in Zimbabwe for all I care, right? As long as you have an internet connection. Like, this is something that's going to revolutionize healthcare, right? How can we get specialists like Mayo Clinic, top specialists, to rural places like Hobart, where when the Taco Bell opened, the mayor was out with a big scissors and a ribbon cutting ceremony, right? I mean, it's a small town, right? So how can we leverage that to really make the healthcare world smaller for people, right? Realizing that there are more dimensions than just physical health, right? Psychological health, spiritual health, emotional, occupational, feeling safe. When was the last time any of you had a doctor ask you if you feel safe, right? I mean, you don't have to raise your hand, but I would venture to guess probably not recently, right? But if you feel unsafe, what do you think what effect does that have on your sleep? What effect does that have on your blood pressure? Don't you think that's something that's important that we should take into account, right? And then finally, optimizing something called health span, right? How many of you are familiar with this term health span? Has anyone ever heard this before? All right, so great. I can teach you and I'll seem like I came up with this idea. But the idea is there's a difference between being alive and living, right? Does that make sense, right? So when we talk about kind of our current model of care, right, we are just optimizing something called lifespan. We're keeping you alive as long as possible, but when we look at how long are you functional, we're seeing that there's a lot of debility, particularly in the last 10 years of life, right? Whereas what we need to move to is optimizing health span, keep you healthy as long as we can, keep you surfing until the day before you die. I'm not putting that out there in the universe if you're a surfer, right? But keep you active, keep you going, right? So that you're healthy for as long as you can be, right? And that's a paradigm shift in the way that we approach healthcare right now. So this was, anybody ever watch Shark Tank? You know that show Shark Tank, right? And there's always some invention that's on there that you're like, why didn't I come up with that, right? I think of that sponge, that smiley face sponge. What is that one called? Do you guys know? Scrub Daddy. Really? That's a revolutionary thing. I just saw it at Costco, and it's selling at Game Busters. The guy's like a bajillionaire, right? But this is the cardiovascular trial version of that, if you will. So I read this, and I was like, why didn't I come up with this? But it was a remarkable study that looked at kind of the effect that lifestyle has on cardiovascular health, right? Such a simple thing. And it was based on 4 very simple metrics, right? Do you smoke? Do you have a body mass index less than 30? Do you have a healthy diet, which really just was kind of a low processed food diet? And do you exercise at least once a week, right? Not a super high bar, right? Very simple things that we can incorporate. But that led to some really interesting findings. So they kind of looked at what's called retrospectively. So they looked backwards at a population of people and put them into these categories, and I'll just kind of pull one out for you. So on the bottom here is what's called their genetic risk, right? So they looked at 38 genes associated with cardiovascular health, right? And you were put into a low, you didn't have a lot of those genes, you had a lot of those genes, or you didn't have, you were kind of in between, right? And then they stratified people on those 4 lifestyle metrics. So in the red bar here, that is the horrible lifestyle. In the blue bar, that's the good lifestyle, right? So you're doing 4 of 4, you're doing 2 of 4, you're doing 0 of 4, right? And some unsurprising things happen, right? So if you're at the highest genetic risk and you have the junkiest lifestyle, you have the highest cardiovascular risk, right? Sorry, it's time for water. Here's the intermission. How many of you, for how many people does that knock your socks off, right? Shouldn't really, right? Like if you're like genetically kind of cursed and you're not doing what you need to do, you're going to have a high cardiac risk, right? Similarly, if you're in that low risk groups, you've got blessed genetics, right? And you're engaging in a healthy lifestyle, well, unsurprisingly, you're going to have the lowest cardiovascular risk, right? Not surprising. But the magic happens right here. Is what you see in that high genetic risk group that has the favorable lifestyle. Number one, they reduce their risk by over 50%. They go from 10.7 to 5.1. But these I things here, these are called standard error bars. So this is where statistically you can't tell the difference between 2 groups. And what you see is statistically now, that high genetic risk good lifestyle group is about the same as low genetic risk optimal lifestyle group, right? So you can control your own fate, right? Through just 4 simple things, right? This knocked my socks off. This was like, wow, this is amazing, right? So what are those things and how do we do it and how do we optimize our lifestyle, right? So that's, like I said, that's kind of this next phase of my career. So I kind of talk a lot, like I did a podcast this morning and talk a lot about what I call the 1824 diet, which is if you could eat foods that only existed 200 years ago, right, your body would do a lot better because that's before ultra-processed foods, that's before all these chemicals, all these preservatives. For those of you, anybody here travel to Europe at all, right? So when you go to Europe, right, the same foods that we have here, like ketchup, right, are much healthier versions over there, right? People who are gluten intolerant, they can't eat bread or anything over here, go to Italy and eat pasta and breads and all this stuff all the time because the food is necessarily different, right? So what we need to do now really is focus on diet and lifestyle and how those things affect us in ways that we don't know and what are the things that we can do to change it, right? So using diet and lifestyle interventions reduce inflammation in our bodies, right? And that, I think, is the single most important step that you can take to really thrive, right? Because what we've learned is that inflammation drives so much of health imbalance, right? There's just an article last week in the Journal of American College of Cardiology that showed inflammatory markers for atrial fibrillation. So what we thought was an electrical problem actually has an inflammatory underpinning, right? Sorry if I'm getting too nerdy with some of this stuff, but it gets me excited, right? Like blood pressure, right? How many people in a blood pressure medicine? You don't have to raise your hands, right? But, right, how much of that is driven by inflammation, right? So when you're inflamed, you set off alert signals in your body, and that puts your body in stranger danger mode, and then it constricts your blood vessels, right? Thyroid, cancer, osteoporosis, hormone imbalances, brain fog, neural fog is a huge part of what we're learning about right now, something called neuroinflammation, inflammation of the brain, and how that mimics Alzheimer's. So we have tons of people out there in the world that are being incorrectly diagnosed as having cognitive issues that are really just have neuroinflammatory issues. And so we can actually change that through our diets and through our lifestyle, right? So treating is not the same thing as healing, right? So putting you on medicines is not the same thing as taking care of that root cause. That's really where the healing is. And that's where my soul kind of split in two, because I knew that I was doing a great job treating people for heart attack, right? Nothing's better for a heart attack than a stent, right? Other than not having it in the first place, right? But I felt like we're not taking care of the underlying issue, right? We're not doing the healing that we need to, right? So if you're here in Mended Hearts, you or someone you love, right, has been a recipient of amazing care, right? Otherwise you'd be dead, right? Is what it is, right? I've got a weird sense of humor sometimes, right? But, wouldn't it have been better to have a time machine and not have that issue in the first place, right? Or if you had an issue, right, wouldn't it be great to not have to deal with that again, right? Or if you have a son or a daughter or a neighbor or someone, wouldn't it be great to help them not have that problem in the first place, right? That's the crux of Health 3.0, and that's where we need to be. Because although it may not be your fault, right, kind of this health crisis that we're in, it is your responsibility to be the best version of you that you can possibly be. Right? I'll say that again. It is your responsibility to take ownership of your health. Right? I can't tell you how many times I had patients come into my office and say, I don't know what medicines I'm on, just look at the list. Right? And if you're that person in here, I don't want to call you out, right? But that signaled to me a colossal failure of that person's healthcare team. Because just like Uncle Sam says, I want you, right? I want you to be part of your team, because honestly, you're the most important member of your team, of your healthcare team, right? So we need you to engage, right? I want you to ask questions. I want you to say, do I really need to be on this medication? I want you to say, why am I on this? I want you to learn, right? There's never been a time in human history where information has been so easy to get, right? How many people don't have a smartphone in this room? Right? I mean, my daughters are in this club called Model UN right now, and I did that in high school. I kind of joked around with them. I said, well, when I was in high school, it was all one continent, so it was a really kind of easy, right? That was before the land masses drifted and all that stuff. But I remember one year, my country was Estonia, right, that I was representing for some topic. I don't know what it was. And so I had to go to the library, and if it wasn't on microfilm, I had to put a library request, right? And then hopefully 2 or 3 weeks later, the article would come. Hopefully it was in English, because if it was in Estonian or whatever language they speak, I wouldn't be able to use it, right? And now they could just go to the www.estoniatimes.com or whatever, right, and get the information right there, right? So information is huge, right? And so it's your responsibility to use that information well, right? So I talk a big game, right? Oh yeah, be responsible and all this stuff. Does it work? Well, that's what I've been focusing on for like the last year or so. So we're going to talk about a couple of people that I've been able to help. So this is Dawn. She is a single mom, nurse, family history of heart problems. She was scared to death. She actually worked with me when I was a fellow at Henry Ford in Detroit. So she knew me for when I was like a little dockling, I'm the same size, but and she just had a ton of issues. So she was now reaching that menopause age where she felt off. Her body wasn't working the way she wanted it to. She was tired. Her joints were achy. She couldn't lose weight. Avid exerciser, and she thought, oh, you know what, I'll be vegan because I watched a Netflix documentary and that vegan seems to cure everything, right? So she was vegan for 15 years and just still had so many problems. And so I put this thing on Facebook about kind of at that time, kind of I was having this, epiphany, and if anybody would like to join me, come on by. So she actually joined one of my first groups. She did this thing called a system assessment questionnaire that I like to do to kind of just get a state of the union, so to speak. And then we kind of targeted what were the things that were going on. So even though she was vegan, what we learned was she was eating a lot of the wrong foods, because a lot of the foods that we think are healthy for people aren't healthy for you, right? So we talked about personalization of diet, right? So we taught her kind of what were the foods that were not healthy for her. And things got so much better. She lost 25 pounds, which was great. And this is not about weight loss, right? But it's about optimization of health, right? So I don't want to just say that, if you want to look sexy in a bathing suit, this is Health 3.0 is the answer for you, right? But it's really about taking care of the underpinning, right? And this heartburn, chronic heartburn that she had was gone. She was sleeping better. And her joint pain got better. She's actually become kind of part of this program that I do. And this is really her words that she put up on Facebook when someone was asking, is that, she's able to lose the weight, maintain her muscle mass, and that aching all over got better for her. Alert, rested, her sleep improved, and that's just through diet and lifestyle. So we actually took her off her meds, right? So imagine how many of you last time you went to your doctor, they took you off meds, right? Not very often, right? But just through eating correctly and breathing and sleeping and lifestyle changes, right? She's able to kind of change things. So goals are within your reach, right? We just need a proven network. This is another gentleman, Brian, who's 52. He just kind of fell apart, as a lot of us do as dads, right? Young dads, tired all the time, not sleeping well. He would actually have to go in his car in the afternoon and take a nap. So he would like take a little break from work, go take a nap, right? Kind of saw me and said, you know what, it's time for a change. And then, just through diet and lifestyle, now this took him a while, a couple of months here, but he lost 130 pounds, more energy than ever. He's one of our surf buddies. He's trying to run his first 5K. Like that was not something that he could do before. And this is just in his own words. It can be done. You can do it. I don't want to kind of talk too much about the program, but this is kind of something important is, his original goal wasn't to lose that much weight, but as his, he was proud that he came off of his meds. So he lost his weight, right? Took a little bit over a year, but he was on 3 orals and an injectable for diabetes, a statin, a blood pressure med, and an acid reflux med. And through diligent work, right, lifestyle, diet was better, right? And the amazing thing about his transformation is that he became a motivator for his family. So his wife kind of signed on. She kind of helped improve her health, right? And I think even more importantly, their son is eating better, right? And so when I think of kind of family history, right? When you go to the doctor, everyone asks you, oh, did your mom have this? Did your dad have this, right? But how much of family history is really dietary history, right? I had never had a fried bologna sandwich in my life until I went over to a friend Mark's house in Hobart, Indiana. Right? I talk about Hobart a lot, right? And his mom made fried bologna sandwiches. I'd never heard of that before, right? Talk about the most inflammatory thing that you can eat. God knows what's in bologna, and you're frying it, and you're putting it on white bread with butter. Come on, right? But maybe their family, maybe part of the reason they have a high cardiovascular risk is that's their comfort food. That's what their grandma made their mom, right? And their great grandma made, and so on and so forth. You go back generations and generations, right? So it's amazing and it's powerful, right? So, as we do this, it's you can do it on your own probably, but everybody does better with a coach, right? Like I'm a Chicago fan. Michael Jordan didn't win a championship until Phil Jackson came in, right? What do you guys have? Pat Riley? Is that the Lakers guy, right? So we need help with this. It's not something you can do easy. And I kind of love this, is, when I is replaced by we, illness becomes wellness, right? So as I said at the outset, right, if you want to travel fast, stick with the I. If you want to travel far, go with a we, right? So really communities like this, plugging in with people that have been here, right? Plugging with groups of folks that want to be better, right? That is an essential part of Health 3.0, which is how you can take over your health, right? So that's what I look like on a fancy screen, I guess. But that's kind of where I see healthcare going and kind of why I'm now doing what I'm doing. But we need a change, right? We need a time to change. And you guys, like I said, are recipients of amazing healthcare, right? Mission Hospital, like the number of services and things that we have here for a small community hospital of this size is ridiculous. So we are living in a great location, right? When I think about the stroke services, the cardiovascular, world-class surgeons, world-class cardiologists, I mean, you can't throw a dart without hitting someone who's world-class, in the doctor's lounge, right? Don't throw darts at doctors, by the way. But and so even with the best healthcare in the world, though, right, we need to start changing our mindset, right? We need to be better, and that's where I'm focused right now.